Zion Seal, you were messing with that one day. I was wondering if you can try to learn that for next week.
Sure, yeah. We can do that. Playing through this song real quick.
Well, all right. Well, good evening. It's time to get started here. We're going to sing Hide Thou Me tonight. It's hymn number 108 if you wanted to look in your hymnal. Hide Thou Me. Sometimes I feel discouraged and think my life in vain. I'm tempted into murmur and of my lot complain. But when I think of Jesus and all he's done for me, then I cry, "O Rock of Ages, hide thou me. O Rock of Ages, hide thou me. No other refuge have I but thee. When life's dark veil I wander far, far from thee, then I cry, O Rock of Ages, hide thou me. Sometimes it seems I dare not go one step further on, and from my heart all courage has slipped away and gone. But then, and all his love for me, then I cry, O Rock of Ages, hide thou me. O Rock of Ages, hide thou me. No other refuge have I but thee. When life's dark veil I wander far, far from thee, then I cry, O Rock of Ages, hide thou me. Oh, what a friend is Jesus, sure anchor for my soul. So tender, true, and gracious, I'm safe in his control. My help in time of danger, my strong defense is he. Oh, thou blessed Rock of Ages, hide thou me. O Rock of Ages, hide thou me. No other refuge have I but thee. When life's dark veil I wander far, far from thee, then I cry, O Rock of Ages, hide thou me. All right, if we can get a couple of you men to come, we'll go ahead and receive the evening offering. Everybody liking the weather? I haven't heard anyone bragging about how nice the weather is. Well, let's go to the Lord in prayer. Brother David, would you lead us, please?
Father, we thank you this night, Lord. We just ask you to bless this offering, Father. Father, we're just so thankful to have the freedom to come and work with you, Father. We need to just want to pray for America, Lord. that we can continue that.
Yes, amen.
Seems to be getting so bad, Father.
Mm-hmm.
Father, I just ask you to bless people on our prayer list, Lord, and bless Pastor as he delivers the message tonight, and just guide and direct in Christ's name.
Amen.
Well, amen. It is a blessing to see each one here tonight, and so glad that you've made the decision to be here on our mood-swinging weather night. It's just hot, cold, and looking forward to all that the Lord has in store. We are leaving tomorrow to go to the couples retreat, and looking forward to that. Amen. And so if you could be in prayer for us as we make that journey to Louisiana, and trusting that it'll be safe travels there and back, and all that goes well. We also have a few things that are upcoming. Of course, this upcoming Sunday is time change. If you're unaware of that, it is. And I'm excited. I love this time change. I love the daylight and the evening time, and I'm really looking forward to it. And so that's this Sunday. Also, don't have a slide for this, Brother Tim, but this Sunday we do have our new member luncheon that we're going to be having. So if that is you, if you are new since we've been here, then you're included in that, okay? And so we're wanting to do a lunch just to kind of go over the bylaws of the church, the way the finances and business of the church is conducted, and also have opportunity to find opportunities for people who aren't plugged in to get plugged in. And so I'm looking forward to that, and you don't need to bring anything. There'll be food, lunch provided directly after the service this Sunday morning. I'll encourage you to stay, and we'll feed you, and then look forward to a great service here tonight, or this upcoming Sunday. That's going to be great. Good service tonight, too, hopefully. But we do have our missions conference also, the 22nd to the 26th, and sure looking forward to that. The Sunday before that, on the 19th, I'll be preaching some messages about missions and passing out the books and getting everybody geared up and ready to go. So that's just a week and a half away. I hope you're praying for the missions conference. I hope you're praying that God will do a great work in our church, and sure thrilled about the 4 missionaries that we have that are going to be here with us, and good representation of different ages, different backgrounds, different countries that they're going to, and so I think it's going to be a great conference, and sure looking forward to it. And I hope you'll make plans to be here Wednesday night for the banquet. If you haven't signed up, it's back there at the bulletin. Actually, there's a lot of sign-up stuff on the bulletin right now, a lot of information. You can avail yourself there. And then, of course, Thursday, Friday, the services, and then on Saturday, the men's breakfast at 8 a.m., and then the ladies' lunch at noon. And then, of course, normal services on Sunday. And sure looking forward to all that is upcoming. So those are the announcements. And so let's take our Bibles now and turn to the book of Daniel and chapter number 8. Daniel and chapter number 8. Now, we got a good little clip into the prophecy of Daniel the last few weeks. And chapter 7, of course, talking about the different beasts and the big horns and little horns and all that. And we're going to get to that in just a moment. But let's stand together and read Daniel chapter number 8. Now, we are going to read the whole chapter, so if you need to be seated, feel free to do that. It'll be a little bit of a lengthier read. I will try to give due diligence to do it quickly, but also give respect to the text here this evening. So Daniel chapter 8 and verse number 1, and we are going to cover this entire chapter tonight, and we'll get it done in time, okay? Actually, there's not as much to deal with as there was in chapter 7. So Daniel chapter 8, verse number 1, it says, "In the 3rd year of the reign of King Belshazzar, a vision appeared unto me, even unto me Daniel, after that which appeared unto me at the first. And I saw in a vision, and it came to pass when I saw that I was at Shushan in the palace, which is in the province of Elam. And I saw in a vision, and I was by the river Ulai. Then I lifted up mine eyes and saw, and behold, there stood before the river a ram which had 2 horns. And the 2 horns were high, but one was higher than the other, and the higher came up last. I saw the ram pushing westward and northward and southward, so that no beast might stand before him, neither was there any that could deliver out of his hand. But he did according to his will, and became great. And as I was considering, behold, an he-goat came from the west, on the face of the whole earth, and touched not the ground. And the goat had a notable horn between his eyes, and he came to the ram that had 2 horns, which I had seen standing before the river, and ran unto him in the fury of his power. And I saw him come close unto the ram, and he was moved with choler against him, and smote the ram, and brake his 2 horns, and there was no power in the ram to stand before him. But he cast him down to the ground, and stamped upon him, and there was none that could deliver the ram out of his hand. Therefore the he-goat waxed very great. And when he was strong, the great horn was broken. And for it came up 4 notable ones toward the 4 winds of heaven. And out of one of them came forth a little horn, which waxed exceeding great toward the south and toward the east and toward the pleasant land. And it waxed great, even to the host of heaven, and it cast down some of the host and of the stars to the ground, and stamped upon them. Yea, he magnified himself even to the prince of the host, and by him the daily sacrifice was taken away. And the place of his sanctuary was cast down, and an host was given him against the daily sacrifice by reason of transgression, and it cast down the truth to the ground, and it practiced and prospered. Then I heard one saint speaking, and another saint said unto that certain saint which spake, How long shall be the vision concerning the daily sacrifice, and the transgression of desolation, to give both the sanctuary and the host to be trodden under foot? And he said unto me, Unto 2,300 days, then shall the sanctuary be cleansed. And it came to pass, when I, even I Daniel, had seen the vision and sought for the meaning, then behold, there stood before me as the appearance of a man, and I heard a man's voice between the banks of Ulai, which called and said, Gabriel, make this man to understand the vision. So he came near where I stood, and when he came, I was afraid, and fell upon my face. But he said unto me, Understand, O Son of Man, for at the time of the end shall be the vision. Now, as he was speaking with me, I was in a deep sleep on my face toward the ground, but he touched me and set me upright. And he said, Behold, I will make thee know what shall be in the last end of the indignation. For at the time appointed the end shall be. The ram which thou sawest, having 2 horns, are the kings of Media and Persia. And the rough goat is the king of Grecia. And the great horn that is between his eyes is the first king. Now, that being broken, whereas 4 stood up for it, 4 kingdoms shall stand up out of the nation, but not in his power. For in the latter time of their kingdom, when the transgressors are come to the full, a king of fierce countenance and understanding dark sentences shall stand up, and his power shall be mighty, but not by his own power, and he shall destroy wonderfully, and shall prosper and practice, and shall destroy the mighty and the holy people. And and through his policy also he shall cause craft to prosper in his hand, and he shall magnify himself in his heart, and by peace shall destroy many. He shall also stand up against the prince of princes, but he shall be broken without hand. And the vision of the evening and the morning, which was told, is true. Wherefore, shut thou up the vision, for it shall be for many days. And I, Daniel, fainted, and was sick certain days. Afterward I rose up, and did the king's business, and I was astonished at the vision, but none understood it. Now, titled the sermon here tonight, a lesson, whatever you want to call it, Israel is back in the picture. Okay, Israel is back in the picture. So may God bless the reading of His Word. Thank you for standing. You may be seated. I know a lot more lengthy of a passage here tonight, and I appreciate your attention to the Word. Now, in Daniel 2 and in Daniel chapter number 7, we dealt with the scope of world history in two different perspectives. One was that in the way the world views world empires, beauty, glory, great wealth and majesty. And the other, how God views them as these terrible beasts that were brought forth. Now, in chapter 8, we're going to get into a little bit more detail with a couple of these kingdoms. Now, of course, we've talked about 4 world empires. Brother Tim, if you want to bring up that picture there. We've dealt with 4 world empires thus far. And, of course, they are depicted, again, in chapter 2. As you can see on the photo there on the right side is that statue of gold that was seen in Daniel 2, the head of gold of the Babylonian Empire, which, of course, is manifest in the beast in chapter 7 as that lion with the eagle's wings. Okay? And then, of course, you have the Medes and the Persians, always depicted as that double-sided type beast or entity. So with the statue, it's the right arm and the left arm. The right arm dominant, left arm the non-dominant arm. But there's 2 branches, one more powerful than the other. The bear, it raises up on one side. It's this massive beast of a bear, lumbering and crushing everything underneath of it. But it's leaning on one side as it's stronger on that one side. Okay? Of course, then you get to the midsection and the thighs. Obviously, those are made of brass. And, of course, that is then represented with the beast of a leopard with wings. And so it's got 4 wings and 4 heads, which we even talked about here tonight. The 4 horns. So we'll get into more of what all the 4 divisions of that is. But, of course, the leopard showing the speed of which this kingdom moved in its conquering. And then a 4th kingdom shown by iron, and then iron mingled with clay in the statue, showing it's not valuable, it's tough, it's strong. And of course, in Daniel 7, this was described as this terrible beast, which really wasn't identified as like an animal. All the other ones are kind of like these weird animals. This is like some kind of monster. That's the only way it's almost described as. It's got iron teeth and it's fierce. It's got 10 horns. 3 of them are plucked up from the root. And this little horn comes up with eyes and a mouth that are speaking. And of course, we talked about that little horn quite a bit last week. That little horn is what we would call the Antichrist. Now, that would be a proper name being used there. There are many Antichrists. What do we mean by that? There's a lot of people that are against God. But there is one person called the Antichrist, and he is that little horn there described in these chapters. Now, each of these empires are referenced with little regard to their impact on Israel. These are world kingdoms. Now, some say, well, what about kingdoms that are over in China or something that was happening over here? Now, again, God's timetable and what He's working with here, all of these kingdoms would have been in and around Israel. So this is a significance of these being world empires that had dominance over the land of Israel. Okay, so don't lose that as you're going through it. But they are world empires that had conquered and were over, to a degree, over Israel. Now, Israel is not really a big emphasis of chapter 2 or chapter 7. Actually, you could study those chapters and Israel has almost nothing to do with them. In chapter 8, Israel starts to come back into the picture. Now, this is important because, as is the case with end-time stuff, everyone wants to forget Israel, but Israel is the focus of the 70th week of Daniel, or what we would call the tribulation time. It's when God brings back to the forefront his people and will begin to deal with them. Another interesting fact about Daniel, Daniel chapter 1 was written in Hebrew, but Daniel chapter 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 are all written in Aramaic. And then you go to chapter 8, and guess what language starts getting used again? Hebrew. And again, not trying to draw emphasis to things that aren't there, but there's this drawing our attention back to the Hebrew people and Israelites is what's being dealt with here. Now, so we're going to bring that in. There's two kingdoms that are really in focus here. The animals, the bear and the leopard, and then the statue would be the arms of silver and the midsection of brass. Those two kingdoms are the main emphasis of chapter 8 and how they connect to God's people, Israel. So this is mostly history that we're going to talk about. It was prophecy for Daniel. It hadn't happened yet. It was still yet future, about 200 to 400 years in the future, that it was going to happen. For us, it's history. So much so that there are people who say, well, this couldn't have been Daniel that wrote this because it has so much accuracy that it obviously was an imposter pretending to be Daniel who wrote it after the fact. Well, that's not the case. Daniel was given this prophecy, and it is that accurate because God knew what was going to happen. Now, before we dig into this, I think it's important for us to understand what's called mountain peaks in prophecy. And so this is a image. I know you probably can't make out a lot of the details with it. We probably could print that out and give it to you there. There are those who try to map out some things with prophecy. So if you've never heard of what mountaintop prophecy is, if you've ever been out hiking before, I enjoy every time we've had opportunity to go up to Colorado and go out hiking. And boy, it's a lot of fun. I really enjoy going out hiking and things. And you can be in a certain area and look out, and you can catch certain landscapes from a perspective. Now, when that perspective changes, you climb up a mountain, you see things differently, right? And when you're down in the valley, you see things differently. So God allowed some mountaintop prophecy to take place, which was this. God showed Daniel some things. He opened his eyes and he looked out and he saw some things. But from his perspective, he caught the mountaintops, and there were some valleys in between that God did not show Daniel. Now, there's a couple important things to remember with that, which are going to start coming into play. That's why we're going to kind of work on that right now in dealing with prophecy, okay? The first thing is this. When you're dealing with prophecy, and in particular here what we're dealing with in Daniel, major things are highlighted in the future, but not every detail is given. So just like we talked about, you hit the mountaintops, but you miss the valley. Well, some people might say, well, how come Daniel didn't explain all this? Well, if he explained every single detail about everything that was going to happen through all of human history, we'd never be able to read it, let alone comprehend it, okay? So this isn't obviously a play-by-play detail of everything involved in human history. It's what God knew Daniel needed for his time and what we needed for our time. Okay, so there's not every detail that's given, and that's important to remember. The second thing, and this is maybe the one that gets a little confusing. Prophecy can have double meaning, meaning it can have an immediate application and a future application. Let me give you an example. You remember the beautiful verse that we say all the time at Christmas time in Isaiah, for unto us a child is given, unto us a son is born, you know. And then we read, behold, a virgin shall conceive. Hey, those scriptures are nestled. If you read the context, they're talking about an immediate application. Something happened right then in Isaiah's day, but obviously they had application to something in the future, something when Messiah, Jesus Christ, would come. Now, the same is true here. We're really going to talk about that little horn that comes up in chapter 8. If you were paying attention while we were reading, the he-goat, the one with the big horn between his eyes, that breaks, and there's 4 horns that come out. And out of those 4 horns, there's like a little horn that comes out of it. And then it says all these really nasty things about that little horn. Okay, that little horn is primarily talking about an individual in the Roman Empire, okay? But it also is a picture of a future guy that's coming who was the little horn in chapter 7, the Antichrist. So prophecy can have an immediate application and a bigger future application. So that's important to remember too when we go through this. So again, not trying to get bogged down with too much detail, but it's important to notate that before we get into chapter 8, because we need to understand some people say, well, what about the church and what about this? Okay, not all those details were given to Daniel, okay? He saw the mountaintops of prophecy, and there's an immediate application to prophecy and yet a future application to this prophecy, okay? So let's talk about the time and location that this is going to happen. Verse 1 and 2 actually tell us that. We won't really dig into it, but it says it's the reign of King Belshazzar. Of course, this is the last king of Babylon. So this is before, you remember when the hand shows up on the wall in Daniel 5 there and scratches on the wall, many, many tekel upharsin, your kingdom's been found weighed and wanting and all that. Okay, that would be way on down the line of Belshazzar's reign. So this is about 12 years before that happens. So this is a couple years into the reign of Belshazzar, which means Daniel's about 67 years old, okay, approximately around that age. Okay, Daniel was in Babylon. We have no indication that he was somewhere else. We'll talk about here in just a moment the location of where he's at with Shushan and all that. Brother Tim put the map there, so that's great. You can see that. So Shushan is actually way away from where Babylon is actually at, about 350 miles. So Daniel is not in Shushan. You say, but he says here that he saw and there was a river and he saw this stuff and he was at Shushan. Yeah, he's having a vision, right? God's showing him something. He's not actually physically there. He's in Babylon, and God, in a vision or in a trance, whatever you want to call it, shows him Shushan, shows him that palace there in Susa, okay? So the place where he's taken, if you will, in this trance or in this vision, is in Susa is the name of the town. Shushan is the name of the palace, okay? So he's taken to the palace there of Shushan, and it's in the province of Elam by the river Ulai. Now, again, you can do some geography, but he lets us know basically the exact location of where this is happening. Now, again, this is some 200 to 400 years before any of this prophecy actually will take place. So, really quick, verse 15 and 16, Gabriel shows up. There's one, presumably God, that says, Gabriel explained these things to Daniel. Gabriel is always that archangel who is a messenger, one who's explaining things. And so here we see him once again showing up. And of course, apparently angels are overwhelming to behold, because every time you see them in the Bible, the first thing they say is, fear not, which makes me think everybody's terrified when they see them, okay? And so apparently that's the case here with Gabriel, and he is going to make understanding brought forth out of this. Verse 17 and 18, Daniel is brought out of the trance, brought out of the dream, so that he might be given the meaning, what it means, okay? That happens there. And then verse 26 and 27, Daniel is told the vision is not going to happen for some time, okay? Like I said, it's going to be 200 to 400 years until it happens. But he does understand this. When he gets out of this whole thing, this trance and this interpretation of it, his tummy's not feeling very well, and it made him sick. Like bad sick for several days before he started feeling better. So let's give some description of what all this is. So the Persian Empire, remember the arms and chest of silver, the great lumbering bear that's raised up on one side with the 3 ribs in its mouth. Okay, that's the Persian Empire, the Medo-Persian Empire. Well, once again, we can't just stick with one imagery, right? The arms of silver is not good enough now. The bear's not good enough. So we're getting one more description here, and it's given to us there in verses 3 and 4, and again in verse number 20, which is this: a ram with 2 horns. So you get a lovely picture of a ram with 2 horns. Now, one thing that is not on this picture, we probably could have done a better job of, is one of the horns starts out smaller, but then gets bigger than the other. Now, this is in reference to the Persian Empire, okay? Remember, you got 2 sides to this. Just like with the statue, you have a left arm and a right arm. Just like with the bear, you got the one side that's raised up. Here, once again, you got the 2 horns. Medes, Persians. The Persian Empire started after the Median Empire, but grew stronger than the Median Empire. Okay, so that's the description there of the 2 horns, and one being greater than the other and came up after it. The ram is almost exclusively in the Bible seen for its power and its strength. And the same is used here. It describes it this way, that it's pushing north and it's pushing west and it's pushing south. Now, the Persians did go some to the east, but not very much. Okay, so that was the primary areas that they moved, was north, west, and south. And I don't know why, before we did this tonight, I pulled up rams pushing. And there's some hilarious videos on the internet of people getting hit by rams. I'm sure Brother Ricky probably could tell us some funny stories of that too. But I don't know. They just, boom, they just nail it. So that's the picture we get, though, is that they're charging and they're hitting, they're pushing, and they're moving out in these different directions. Basically this way, no one could stand up in front of them. Boom, they're just getting nailed, one after the other. Until there's another animal that comes up, which is described in verses 5 through 8. This one is described as a he-goat with 1 horn between his eyes. Kind of a weird description here of what we get. I don't know. The girls would probably really like this, like some kind of weird unicorn in goat form. I don't know. It's a he-goat with 1 horn that comes up between its eyes, a prominent horn, which means this is no little thing. It's a prominent horn, like very evident to see. Now, the way that this he-goat is described is very interesting, okay? So this, of course, is describing the Greeks. Remember that midsection of brass? And, of course, we have that leopard with the 4 heads and the 4 wings. Here's yet again another description, and it actually tells you right here in the text, it's Grecia. I mean, just comes out and flatly says it there in verse number 21, that's who this is. Now, again, a goat described for its power and its might. It came from the west. Now, again, in relation to Persia and Israel and everything there, Greece would have been to the west. So we understand we're dealing with that there as well. He also says this: he moved over the face of the whole earth and touched not the ground. So it's kind of like, I don't know, it's like this goat that's just floating. It's not even touching the ground. And the idea is there, it's like this goat has jumped and it's just flying. I mean, it's just moving. Okay, once again, you remember the animal depiction? What was it? A leopard with the 4 wings. The speed. Alexander the Great moved quicker than anybody else at conquering the earth, okay, the then known world, okay. We also know this goat did not have 2 horns like the ram, but rather had 1 very prominent horn, and this 1 horn is none other than Alexander the Great, okay. That's exactly who the leader is described as here with this horn. Now, the he-goat, Greece, attacks the ram with choler. That's the good Bible word there. You have a word of the week, make it choler this week. It'll be a good one there for you. Choler simply means this: to be moved with great anger and fury. Now, I don't know about you, but you kind of have these questions that come up and be like, why is Alexander the Great so mad at the Persian Empire? What made him just hot like that? Just, man, where he just wants to nail him, and he is moved with choler, with fury and burning anger. Well, if you backed up the history books a few hundred years, Greece was not unified like it was under Alexander the Great. It was a bunch of city-states that were over there, okay? You have the city there of Athens, and you have Sparta, and you have all the different city-states. Well, there was a guy named Xerxes that decided he was going to make a play for that land, a leader of one of the Persian armies, and he went up there, and there's a lot of famous stuff. He should have taken Greece, but they say they claimed it was their god Poseidon who crashed all the boats, however you want to look at that. There was a big storm that came and crushed all the Persian boats. You know the story of the 300 Spartans that funneled in there through the Thermopylae. That was the Persians. There's a lot of history of the Persians trying to come into Greece and take those lands. Now, this, for Alexander the Great, is personal. It's payback. He has united all of these city-states under one banner, his headship, the Grecian army now, and they are now conquering the world, and the main person they got their eyes on is the Persians, who for years have been trying to infiltrate Greece. So that describes the old. He actually died in the Babylonian Empire area where Babylon was. He died a drunk, and he died a sodomite. He could conquer the world, but Alexander never could conquer himself, and that was his big downfall. Now, because of the speed, about 10 years in which he conquered the earth, his young age, Alexander never named an heir, which means there was big civil war that broke out afterwards. So these 4 horns represent, like the 4 wings and the 4 heads on the leopard, represent the 4 generals that took and divided his kingdom afterwards. Now, these 4 kingdoms were Cassander. You can go ahead and bring up that map there. Cassander, who took the European portions, Macedonia, and Greece proper, as it was. Kind of that pink area up there. Okay? Lysimachus took Asia Minor, or what would be modern-day Turkey. Kind of that orange color you see up there. Seleucus took the rest of Asia, the easternmost part of the kingdom. So all the green, a big chunk, that light kind of lime green looking stuff there. And then this far south one, which is a very interesting one here, he's going to come up a lot in chapter 9 and beyond. And this is Ptolemy. Okay, now Ptolemy here took Egypt, northern Africa, and portions even up into Israel. Okay, so that would be him there. The kind of that, I don't know, avocado green. I don't know what you'd call that, dark green there, hunter green. Now, these are the 4 generals that split up the 4 kingdoms that were there. Now, in verses 19 through 14, we get an interesting picture of what happens in one of these kingdoms. Okay, now, one of these kingdoms, there is a horn that has a little horn that starts out, but then it says it becomes very prominent. So this artist's depiction of that was this massive horn that finally grew out of it, okay? So you have this goat's going through a lot of changes here. You go the prominent horn, and then you have the 4 horns. It's all about the Greek Empire, okay? So this is actually bleeding over into the Roman Empire. So this is where I say Ptolemy and everything that happens there. This is when it becomes the Roman Empire, and you have an individual that comes forth as a leader of this who is absolutely ruthless. You've probably heard of him before. His name is Antiochus Epiphanes. Now there's a picture of him there, one of his busts that they carved out. Antiochus Epiphanes, anybody ever heard of him before? A few people, okay. Antiochus Epiphanes is the greatest picture of the Antichrist that we have in human history. So, like I was talking about the mountaintops of prophecy, you have an immediate application here of this prophecy that is fulfilled in the man Antiochus Epiphanes. But there is a future application that he is an archetype, if you will, of who will be the Antichrist in the end time. Okay, so there's a lot of, if you want to study what the Antichrist is going to be like, just study the life of Antiochus Epiphanes. You'll get a great picture of it. You say, well, what made him so terrible and what made him so bad? Let me mention a few things here. Antiochus Epiphanes established himself as God. He wanted people to worship him as God. He made sacrifices to Jehovah illegal. If anybody was going to worship the God of the Israelites, it was against the law under his rulership. He made circumcision illegal. He made owning a copy of the Torah illegal, burned copies of it. Beyond taking away, he went a step further and even did what is called in the Bible the abomination of desolation, which is where he went into the holy place of the tabernacle and killed an unclean animal, a pig, on the altar and offered its blood up. And so it even talks about here that there will be a cleansing of the temple after a certain period of time, because it had been made unclean by this man doing that. Now again, there's a lot of history that you could look in here. We'll just kind of run through this here. The pleasant land that's described in verse number 9 is Israel. When he is afflicting the pleasant land, it's talking about Israel. Verse number 10 symbolizes his disdain and his hatred for God, his desire to throw him down and trample upon anything that has to do with the one true God, his hatred for him. Verse number 11, he sets himself up as God and wants to be sacrificed to. Verse number 12, there were tons of sacrifices made in honor and to the dishonor of God. Those are things that he did there as well. Verse 13 and 14 gives a time period, 2,300 days. This is a little over 6 years and 3 months that he's going to do this. Now, again, you say, well, what's going on here with 6 years? How come it's not 7 years? And yada, yada, yada. Okay, again, we're mainly dealing with a person, Antiochus Epiphanes, but it has future implications for what's going to happen in the future. So this time period mainly has to do with Antiochus Epiphanes. So if you know history well, we'll do the quick work of this, okay? So in the Bible, there's some books that are not included in the Bible because they're not part of the Bible, but they were, at one point they were included. They're called the apocryphal books, right? If you've been coming to Sunday school, we talked about those. Okay, part of the Old Testament, there's some history books. I encourage you to read these history books, but read them as such, history. They're called the 1st and 2nd Maccabees, okay? Now, if you've ever studied the Maccabean era, there's a guy named Judas Maccabeus, and he leads a revolt. He gathers up all the Israelites when Antiochus Epiphanes is being Antiochus Epiphanes. You have Judas Maccabeus who raises up the Israelites, and they start doing types of guerrilla warfare. Interesting reads and stories about this guy. And he delivers the Israelites from Antiochus Epiphanes and delivers them during that time, almost like a judge in the Old Testament. They still celebrate it today with a holiday called Hanukkah. Okay, so interesting history of how all that ties in with all of that. So this is from this man, Antiochus Epiphanes, who really is the first major anti-Semite. If you thought Adolf Hitler was bad, study Antiochus Epiphanes, okay? I'm not saying Adolf Hitler wasn't an evil guy. What I'm saying is Antiochus Epiphanes was him on steroids, okay? And Judas Maccabeus is the one who delivered them. Now, he is an archetype. He is a picture of what the Antichrist will be during the last times. Now, the primary interpretation of this little horn is that man who was Antichrist, but not the Antichrist. But, of course, we can make a lot of connections, can't we? There's a lot of connections that can be made between him and them. Now, again, as is the case with all prophecy, I know we just like back the truck up and dump the load here tonight. Like a lot of information to process, okay? But here's the thing. All prophecy is not given just so we know something. It's given so that we might be provoked or encouraged to do right. God has called us with the knowledge of knowing, hey, if he nailed this, Daniel prophesied that this was going to happen about 300-400 years before it ever happened, and with pinpoint accuracy it happened. Well, if that's the case, there are a lot of things that are recorded in this book that are still yet future that are going to happen, and we need to know this, with pinpoint accuracy, God will fulfill all of His word. So what does that make me want to do? Well, it makes me want to live righteous and live for the glory of God right now, here on this earth, for His glory, because He is returning. Any day He's coming back, the trumpet will sound and He will return. That man of sin will be revealed, the Antichrist, those that are saved. We're going to be raptured out of here. There's going to be a 7-year tribulation time. Jesus is going to come back, set up a millennial kingdom. We're going to rule and reign with Him for 1,000 years. You say, well, that seems far-fetched. Well, I'm sure all this seemed far-fetched when Daniel dreamed about it too. And yet, with pinpoint accuracy, it is recorded for us in the Word of God so that we know this. God always comes good on His Word. And there are still many things yet future that God indeed will come good on. Well, let's all stand together as we come to a time of invitation here tonight. And again, I know it's hard to maybe pinpoint an application from this, but I hope as we look towards things yet future, it encourages us in the present to do that which is right and do that which is holy. So, Father, I pray that You'll bless now in this invitation. Lord, I pray that You'll give grace and help to us. Lord, I pray as the book of Titus says, Lord, that we would live soberly, vigilantly in this present hour, knowing that You're going to return. And Father, I pray that You would help us to respond now to Your word preached. And Lord, help us to understand that You have still yet more for us in the book of Daniel. And so bless thou in this invitation. It's in Your name we do pray. Lord, spoken to your heart, the altar is open.
Have Thine own way, Lord, have Thine own way. Thou art the potter, I am the clay. Mold me and make me after Thy will, while I am waiting, yielded and still. Have Thine own way, Lord, have Thine own way. Search me and try me, Master, today. Whiter than snow, Lord, wash me just now, as in Thy presence humbly I bow. Have Thine own way, Lord, have Thine own way. Wounded and weary, help me, I pray. Power, all power, surely is Thine. Touch me and heal me, Savior divine.